Hey, it's Benz from launchflows.com with your tip of the day. Today I want to show you the details of how to pull off a trick where you're using Gutenberg, but you just add a quick snippet of CSS to achieve a result that's otherwise kind of either not available yet or just a lot of work to get to from the controls. An example of that today is how in this Gutenberg layout, I'm using the rotation and the shadowing of these images to get a nice three-dimensional effect. This used to be called skeuomorphic, and I'm old enough to remember when I loved this because it gives me the feeling that there's actually stuff sitting on my desktop. So the way we pull it off is, in this case, I'm using Gutenberg with the free cadence theme and free cadence blocks. This would work with anything. Now, we need to add some CSS, and I'll cover that in a longer tutorial. In general, you can save your CSS in the original theme using the Customizer additional CSS box. You can have a child theme with a style.css. You can save it inline using an HTML block here, or in my case, I just use the cadence blocks page scripts area, at least for now. And this makes it much easier and also very specific to the page I'm working on. The downside of using this is that you sometimes might forget where you've got this. So often I'll take what I'm doing and I'll move it over to my style sheet and save it in one spot when I've got it worked out. Now, how did I pull this off? Quite simply, what we need to do is realize that each of these images by themselves are available to add a custom class name to. So what I'm going to do here is let's go to the blocks, and I'm going to scroll down. When I select this particular block, go to advanced, I have added the additional CSS class name of rotate left. Similarly, if I go to the right side, I've got rotate right. And this is what I'm going to use as the anchor for my CSS. Here's the CSS that I used. I'm going to right click and use my inspector. And this is really an old school translation and rotation. It's been around for some time. It's cross-browser compatible. So when I use my inspector tool, I'm going to highlight the actual image. And we'll notice that there is a figure, which is the wrapper, the original thing that the block is contained within. And we can see that it's got my new class now, rotate left. You can see it right here. But what we want to apply the rule to is the image inside. So we click on that. And then if you want, what you can do is click the plus sign, and that would give you kind of the basis of this, but you need to actually copy the syntax or the rule here. So one of the ways to do that is you could just do dot rotate left and then image. And we don't really need the specificity of the actual image itself, which is unique. We want it to be applying to anything. Okay, and then where we've got the rule here, I'm just going to work off of what I've already created. First of all, we have a Z index. That's a number 2 because we want to make sure that this is on top of any of the background components that might have been loaded first. Next, we want to have translate. Translate is to position something left and right. And this number, if it was at 0, would leave us to the left. And if we keep going and just add a number, we can use our up and down arrows. You could see with a pixel at the end, you can see that we can just increase the number and move it where we want it to be. For this layout, which is the full desktop, I decided on 120 pixels was nice and centered. Next, we have rotation. This is where the magic is. We notice we have -5 degrees because that rotates left, like negative. But watch what happens. If I reduce that, I can rotate it. Woo, I'm getting dizzy. You see, we can come up with any number we want here that looks good. And -5 gave me just enough overlap of the above and below to give the three-dimensional effect. Next, we can scale the item itself. So I made the actual size of this 80% of the original. If I had a different value on that, I can make it bigger or smaller, whatever suits my taste, right? So 80% looked pretty good for mine. The filter of brightness, contrast, and so forth is useful, but not necessarily do you need to have that unless you're doing something there. Border radius, that's what gives the round edges on this. So notice here, if I turn it off, how those edges go square. And I think that's nice just to soften the effect. Box shadow is a rule that also has some additional CSS for the various browsers like Chrome and Mozilla, but that's what gives it the three-dimensional effect. So when I disable that, you see, that doesn't quite pull it, right? That does. And then margin top is where I do the same thing as the translate, but it gives me the just enough of control over where it's positioned over the next layer. So for example, I go up and down, I could tweak that a little bit more, a little bit less, just fine tuning it. Now, this particular rule has its sibling for rotate right, which is the same thing I applied here. Wherever you go with those rules, make sure that you also check your syntax. So let's go back over here to where I've applied this locally. And make sure that you've got the version for the box shadow that will work with whatever browser you're trying to apply. So for example, we've got like WebKit, Mozilla. This is from a different rule, but I just want to make you aware that in today's world, some of the older browsers still need that specificity. Not all of them, but it might be worthy of you checking that out. I noticed in my own rules here, I didn't even put it in, so I'm kind of guilty of the same problem. Do as I say, not as I do. Now, let's talk about the responsive. This applies with the positioning to a full desktop. But what if we're in a smaller view? If we use our inspector and switch over here, for example, to iPad or iPhone, now I'm in iPhone mode, we notice that the position is going to be slightly different. So if we go over here to translate, instead of having 120 pixels, we might, this is rotate right, so let's do this one. Let's refresh this page. And let's see what the translation might be if we're in responsive mode. I've intentionally made this one off a little bit. See where it says 0? We probably want to adjust that to, let's say, I'd say 35 pixels, right? So we go back over here and we've created 2 new responsive rules. I'll discuss these in another video, but basically it says if the maximum width is 767 pixels, that's for a phone, and here is for the tablet, which is the maximum width, let me scroll up to this, is 1024. So here where I say the right image, I'm going to make it 35 pixels. Okay, and then let's adjust this one, our left one, and I inspect it. And I'll do the same thing. I'm going to adjust the translation until it looks just perfect. And it happens to be also 35 pixels. So I've changed these 2 rules just to demonstrate how I do it. So now I've got my tablet. And these 2 additional rules, the one set up for iPhone or phone and the one for tablet, are what modify the positioning so that in the responsive mode, everything centers properly. I click Save and Close, and then I update. And we're basically good to go. So this little effect is nice because if you take your CSS and you were to apply it to wherever you've saved this pattern, you can actually have a very transportable block. And that's what I'm doing over at LaunchFlow's patterns. I'm taking what I'm showing you today and I'm going to save it here for everybody to use. And then you can just take any of the individual components. What's nice about that is that you'll notice these are organized into sections. So you could just take one or more sections and these could be saved either as a reusable block with the inline CSS or by using here, add to reusable blocks, or it can be saved as a whole pattern and then you could just add the pattern and delete what you don't need, change the text and you're good to go. Hopefully this little CSS lesson has taught you a lot. I'm going to try to make these even shorter and quicker once we get the basics in place because I don't have to do a lot of the introduction stuff. But I would like to hear from you as to, is this the kind of content that's useful and would expand your skills as a WordPress either implementer or a freelancer or even as an agency, because we're moving into new territory where the rules of how to build stuff in WordPress are changing. And I aim to make this simple with LaunchFlow's WP Launch Kit, which I encourage you to subscribe to. That's going to have not only a newsletter showing the newest plugins that work in this system, but also will show you live demos of them in an actual context of a full solution. So you don't have to sit there and make it up yourself. You just click a button. And WP Launchify, where I'm able to provide either on a free call or a consultative basis expertise to you for the various things that you need in terms of getting a solution for your business or for your clients. So looking forward to hearing from you guys about whether this content works out. If it is on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Otherwise, look forward to see you on the newsletter, and I'll see you on the next video as well.